They were once regarded as the bastions of Indian culture, trained in the arts of dance and music. But the legacy of courtesans is rapidly diminishing. Mrinal Pande's Sahela, translated by Priyanka Sarkar, presents a lost era, while Manish Gaekwad's The Last Courtesan is a poignant memoir of his mother, Rekhabai. They discuss this lost culture and their books in this session. Watch now.
A very happy World Book Day to all of you. And thank you to HarperCollins for organizing this conversation with two very fascinating writers, Mrinal Pande and Manish Gaekwad. Welcome to this show that Harper has organized on the World Book Day.
Thank you, Naved. Lovely
Thank
to
you,
see you,
Naved.
Manal.
It's
Good
wonderful.
to see you too.
Yeah. It's wonderful to have you both. We'll be talking about your books, of course, but also about the the music of the courtesans, and I think that's a very fascinating subject to talk about as well. And one of the things that struck me about your books is that, of course, there are two different books written in different genres. Manish Gakwad's The Last Courtesan, the memoir of his mother, written in her voice, is of course a memoir. Mrinal Pande's yours is a novel, Sahela, translated from the original Hindi and published by HarperCollins. Uh, One of the things that struck me is the fact that both the books are very, very ingeniously written. Uh, the experiments on multiple levels in terms of language, narration, voice. So, beginning with Manish, if I could ask you, it must have been a very difficult book for you to write because it was based on so many memories of growing up, childhood memories of being raised in a court. If you could tell us a little bit about the book and how was the process of writing.
Naved, thank you. It was actually the easiest thing to do. It was the easiest thing to write because uh, more than me, I think it was my mother who wanted to tell her story. Um, and she wanted to tell me this story even as a child when I was growing up. She would tell me bits and parts about her life, and at that time I probably didn't understand uh, most of it or the hardships that she had been through when she was sold as a child in a quota and you know trained to be a nautch girl, a courtesan. So these were aspects that I kind of heard, which was at the time when I myself was being educated in a boarding school where she had sent me. And so over the years, I would say in my head, I was piecing it together. But it's only in the pandemic that we kind of thought that the world is coming to an end and it's high time we told her story. And she was very happy to talk about it at length. And and when she spoke at length and I recorded her is when I finally understood how fraught her life had been, but she told it with so much wit and humor, and she didn't look back at it in pain or regret, and that's why it made the writing of the book very easy for me.
Right. Mrinal, your book, of course, is a novel, but also not just about courtesans, but also an ode to a lost world in that sense. A tradition that was really receding at a point of time in history when singers who were custodians of culture and tradition, they came to be seen as, they were reduced as human beings, as artists. Tell us a little bit about your own novel and how did that come about?
Well, this novel had been a long time in the making in my mind. I grew up with music. My mother used to sing very well, but
You yourself studied Hindustani vocal music, isn't it?
Sorry?
You studied Hindustani vocal music yourself.
Yes, much later. But
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of music around me because my mother was very fond of music. My father liked music, but he had this terrible Brahminical thing about अच्छे घर की औरतें गाती नहीं हैं, women from good families must not sing in public. So my mother's musical persona in a way was muffled. Of course, she then became a writer, took another path altogether and started writing. And she's also written copiously about music and musicians and also women singers. But she used to be a very good raconteur. She used to talk to us about about her childhood when she grew up in various princely states. Her father was a prime minister to Nawab Sahib of Rampur. Her brother was prime minister to the Raja of Chhatarpur. So these people used to patronize music in a big way, and she had heard a lot of music, seen a lot of mehfils from behind the chicks, as was in the vogue those days, and later on also taken lessons from some eminent ustads who very hesitatingly taught this little rosebud from a high family and not do anything wrong. Then of course she was studying in Shantiniketan where there was no such inhibition. So she learned a lot of music there in Kala Bhavan, and her teachers wanted her to actually become a regular singer. Then she got married like most women in her generation, and that was an end to her career as a singer. But what she used to tell me and what she left unsaid had been within me for a long time. Much later in life, when I was in my early 30s, I started learning classical music methodically, in the sense that I studied both the Shastra and the actual singing. And I had three very good gurus from three different gharanas. I had Dipali Nag from Agra Gharana, who was one of the founder members of the ITC Sangeet Academy, and was also the member of the first screening board for the All India Radio, which brought the wives of courtesans into mainstream music by introducing them as Begum or Devi as per their stated religion. And that is when women singers, classical and semi-classical singers, became a part of the mainstream and earned a name for themselves. Then also I was very fond of a old phonograph in my Nani's house. Everybody in that house sang and everybody in that house loved music. So there was all of this pile of records, and we used to play it with it had a winding apparatus, and we used to listen to songs, and at the end of the song, the singer would state his or her name. Mera naam Afzal Hussain Nagina Wale. Main Jane Ki Bai Chappan Churi. So those records also got embedded in my mind. Then, of course, my second guru was from Indore Gharana, and he was also the director of the All India Radio. And very kind of derisively initially, he took me on as a shagir. But then we became very good friends, and he introduced me to the whole world of how women and men from regular traditional gharanas adjusted to the discipline of All India Radio, how many of them rebelled against it and would insist on certain things, how he and people like him who really understood music gave a lot of jobs to out-of-job companies. Sarangi Nawaz, for example. I have heard excellent Sarangi, but who knows that Sarangi Nawaz went through a very bad patch when the Mehfils closed down and the royal patronage vanished. So All India Radio and Doordarshan then became their patrons. So it was very rarely that there was a bureaucrat or a musician in position where he could understand these people's plight and their talent and give them a good niche. Then, of course, I learned music for 20 odd years. My last guru, who was the biggest influence on me, was the son of Vaman Rao Thakar, who was one of the disciples of the great Gwalior Gharana. And he was, by training, an economist who chose music as his vocation. So he brought to discussions on music a certain logic. He said, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है कि खान साहब ने ऐसी तान लगाई कि पंछी उड़ गए. तान क्या थी? तान का स्ट्रक्चर देखो, तान का स्ट्रक्चर समझो. So he put me in the business of actually analyzing. Then, of course, one of my old friends, who's no more, unfortunately, Dr. Kumar Mukherjee, who was a great raconteur and also one of the co-founders of ITC Academy, he told me, यार ये music का राग का analysis करना है कि रबड़ी की chemical analysis करने की तरह से है. How do you tell कि गोपाल हलवाई कैसे रबड़ी बनाता है? By just tasting it, you know it is good rabdi. So I think there is a lot to be said for that, because music is a sensory experience. It does not emerge from words, and it's very difficult to give words to it. And when I started thinking of writing, then I also found that people have lost the language which these people spoke, the language in which these bandishes were written, the language with the ustads and their disciples spoke to each other. I was very fortunate. I had old-fashioned teachers, and I was proficient in both Hindi, Urdu, and also partly Marathi. So we could converse. And the phrases that they used and the descriptions that they used were very pragmatic, very practical. And they also explained to you how music is constantly changing. So then, for years, I thought about a plausible structure for it. And eventually, I chose the form of letters between various people, because even letter writing is coming to an end. And in letters, earlier people used to open up their hearts. And a letter is something which stays with you. So letters and photographs. So what I was trying to do is to piece together an era, which is now getting lost in the mists of time.
Absolutely. When you talk about these mehfils and that were organized, and they were very much a part of the cultural landscape of that period. And coming to Manish, one of the ghazals that your mother, Rekhabai, was taught was, हमारे बाद अंधेरा रहेगा महफिल में, बहुत चराग जलाओगे रोशनी के लिए. And you write that this was something that she had sort of mastered, and along with another song that was more cheerful. This is, of course, a little bit gloomy, but Hasta Hua Nurani Chehra is a cheerful song that she would sing for patrons who were looking for entertainment. And if you could talk about some of the songs that are part of your memory. What do you think of when you think of the music of the Courtesans?
So, at the time that my mother was in the profession, it wasn't as refined and sophisticated, or like Mrinal said, from any gharana. These girls were using song and dance as a medium of survival. And by this time, which is, I'm talking about the 80s and 90s, by this time, a lot of the music was influenced by Hindi films. And the patrons, their tastes had changed. They were no longer interested in listening to a dadra or a khayal. So they wanted something fast. They were constantly saying, "Kuch chalu sunao, kuch chatpata sunao, kuch jaldi sunao." It was always something that they had to do together with dancing and singing to keep the audience, the patrons, interested. So the choice of songs was often, for example, I remember one of the last songs that was a very big hit in the kothas in Calcutta, and even in the Opera House in Bombay, was Mere Haathon Mein No No Churiyan Hain.
I remember the song.
Yeah. So I think inherently it's the woman telling the man that, take me away from here, and make me a bride, and I'll make your life very happy. But it's also a sort of a teasing song for the woman because most of these men, these patrons, are either already married or they're not really looking for wives here. They haven't come here for to find a suitable partner. They're only looking for entertainment. And it was songs like Mujhe Nau Lakha Manga De Re, O Saiya Deewane. These are songs that the women sing to sort of tease and titillate the men, and that's what was going on in the quotas at that time.
Now, when we, this a large part of this the history of courtesans and the music is laced with the fact that how it sort of started after the especially arrival of the British, that it used to be once it was a receptacle of culture in a sense that it people would but there was always this element of disdain that this music was seen with, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was.
Yes.
Actually, anything which a woman could express herself was made somewhat disdainful. In a way, I now feel that it was an unconscious way of silencing women from letting out, even when they were dancing and they were not too well, but they were dancing for money. They had to look happy and cheerful, and they had to, cater to the whims of the patrons. Fact was that in the late 18th and 19th century, these women were the big protectors of khayal gaiki, of various kinds of genres of music, of gharanas. They also patronized and kept alive a lot of ustads who were facing penury. And but once, as somebody said, once a man achieved a certain status in the musical world, he became an ustad or a pandit so and so. But the woman always remained a baiji. So in a way, there was a conscious and an unconscious way to put down women. These were the first financially totally self-sufficient women who not only brought them to care of themselves, but large families, a lot of hangers on. Take Gohar Jan, for example. Her mother Malka Jan and she were famous tawayas from Calcutta. There were 3 Gohar Jans. There was one from Agra, there was one from another place, and then there was one from Kolkata. The Kolkata one was the one who caught on to the recording industry and its possible potential. So she was one of the first major singers to record her voice. And she made a lot of money, she bought a lot of property. But she lost it all eventually because, she, like most women who have had a tough upbringing and a tough survival, she was very insecure within. And so she went from one man to another. Some of them got married to her, then divorced her, but they all sort of harped on her money and took away portions of her land. I read some letters between lawyers who were handling these cases. They were so, even when they were taking money from Goharbai, they were so disdainful of ये औरतें चालू औरतें हैं कोठे वाली औरतें हैं, that kind of an attitude. So these women were hungry for not just aesthetic approbation, they were somewhere hungrier for cultural and societal approbation, which most of them did not get. In case of Begum Akhtar, Akhtari Bai Faizabadi, I remember her in her old records. छा रही काली घटा जिया मोरा घबराए है, ए मसीहा कुछ तो बोलो क्या तुम्हारी राय है, मेरा नाम अख्तरी बाई फैजाबादी. And her lifelong thing was that she wanted to be a married woman, a respectable woman, and be respected along with being a singer. She was very fortunate, one of the very rare people who got both fame and respect towards the end. But she fought a very bitter battle. She was a friend of my mother's, and they often used to talk to each other, especially when my father was unwell. She was very fond of my mother, and she used to come and sit. And she used to tell my mother कि मैं तुमको देख के समझ सकती हूँ कि शौहर कितना अजीम होता है. और she even gave my mother किसी मजार में जाके कोई उनके लिए छल्ले लाई हैं, बोले कि पीर साहब ने छल्ला दिया है, तुम एक पंजाब को पहना दो, एक अपनी उंगली में पहन लो, सब अच्छा रहेगा. So there was woman hungry for family atmosphere, for family warmth, for children. So, and then there was this sad realization that you can't have it all. So then, part of them hardened and became very calculating. And then people said कि ये तो तवाइफ ऐसी ही होती हैं, सिर्फ पैसे के लिए दोस्ती करती हैं. But that is what makes a public performer, a woman public performer, survive. So even in very old Sanskrit texts, you come across stories about Swatantra women, free women, which is another name for courtesans. And the Kutini Matam Kavyam, which is the advice given to a courtesan by a senior courtesan who is retired and is keeping in touch with them. She says कि वेश्या के दो दुश्मन होते हैं. Your love is your enemy and your heart is your enemy. Your only friend is money. So if you want to survive, then don't fall in love. Then there follows a story of two sisters, one of whom fell in love. The other one did not. She prospered and this one finally dies. So this is one of those short stories dating back to 11th century or something like that. So this is the fact of a woman performer's life. However, having said that, music has undergone a lot of changes which people don't realize. In my mother's generation, people look down on Khayal Gaiki. People like Durjoti Prasad Mukherjee, for example, would say, Khayal Gaiki kya cheez hai? Dhrupad is the soul of Indian music. Then Khayal Gaiki gained prominence. Then slowly by Bhartendu Harishchand's time, late 19th century, the Tawayaf started singing folk songs, was defining them. Thumri, Dadra, Kajri, Cheti, all these songs became very popular. So Bhartendu said, Nripgana laaj chhode muh lagai like Thumri. They stopped being arrogant and displaying their erudition, and they took into their mouths the words of the Thumri. So then Thumri and Cheti and Dadra and Kajri became Upshastri Sangeet, which my mother's generation frowned on as something वो महफिल को राउंड अप करने के लिए या लोगों को लाने के लिए. It was like election time में आपको मजमा जुटाना है तो आप कुछ इस तरह का हल्का फुल्का गा दीजिए. Khayal Gaiki ruled, but Khayal Gaiki has had its day. And frankly, all the major Khayal singers who understood, who came from gharanas, who understood the refined and the very intimate structures of ragas are all gone or about to go. So the kind of music the younger generation likes is the music that they want to have, and so it should be. In life, one has to let go. Our time was our time, it is gone. And the new time is new time. Even in this, sometimes you find very beautiful ditties, very beautiful songs. So I think it's like a river. इधर किनारे काट लिया उधर जा रही है, ठीक है, goodbye. That's it.
Absolutely, it's very interesting. And you mentioned Begum Akhtar, and that really I'm reminded of this beautiful book, another book by HarperCollins, and that is The Life and Music of Begum Akhtar. It's a volume of pieces.
Right.
In the future, and some of the scintillating essays and reminiscences of her friends and associates. So beautiful book there. We have to sort of wind this up now. So one last question about, and very quickly, both of you, if you can give us a sense of how do you see this attitude changing now that in recent years there have been quite a number of books, in across genres, and that have been about the wives, the culture, the music, their lives. Do you think it's slightly, that attitude is changing now, and people are becoming much more sort of accepting and realize that what happened to them was actually wrong,
right? These are two different things actually. Social acceptance and art are two different things. At no time do you have total social acceptance for new art forms. So you will always find people who experiment, people who go out of their way to preserve redundant, almost near redundant art form. They are subjected to ridicule and even ostracization. So I wouldn't say that what is happening is wrong or what happened was all for the good of women. because they did survive, but they survived without acclaim. They survived without social acceptance. They survived without being able to hold their heads up high and say, मैं तो गाना गाती हूँ और मैंने गा गा करके अपनी तकदीर बनाई है. ऐसा नहीं कह सकते थे. So, इसलिए to that extent, I am happy that women musicians today or singers today can say that. So there is social acceptance, but unfortunately, social acceptance के साथ ही the heart of the music has evaporated because the society which created that music is also evaporating. People, I asked music students very often, do you understand the meaning of this bandish in Brij Bhasha? They don't. So unless you understand the language in which what you are singing is couched, so there is a fracture between the language and the notes. And in a way, I sometimes feel notes are angry with us, and they will not really reveal themselves anymore and let these people carry on with their little pranks and little jokes and their little fusion things. But somehow the other, longevity doesn't seem to be a big quality of this music.
Final comments from Manish, and then
I feel like I'll keep it very short. I think अभी तो सारे कोठे खाली हैं, बस थोड़ी इज्जत देनी बाकी है, तो वही मिल जाए तो बहुत बहुत.
that's very well said, actually, because dignity it's all about dignity after all. And with this was really a fascinating discussion that we had. Thank you so much, both of you. Today is World Books Day, and I'm sure those of you who are watching it are already into reading, and you know the value of books. You know how important it is to read books and what reading does to us. They basically, books make us humans. They make us more empathetic, and we should be on today and on World Books Day. We should be grateful to the publishers who are bringing out such fascinating books year after year after year. So on that note, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you so much,
Manish.
Now,
Thank you. I enjoyed meeting both of you. Thank you and God bless.